Now, anti-GBV campaigners are hitting the road as part of raising awareness of the ongoing scourge. The Sylvester Mashilo Foundation is partnering with Featherbrooke Village Shopping Centre to use recreation and sport to raise this all-important social message. Sylvester joins me in studio this morning, and thank you very much for making the time this morning. Perhaps tell us a little bit about the foundation and the work that you do before we get into the specifics of the run that you'll be hosting.
Thank you, Rapiwa. The foundation was founded out of an acknowledgement that we live in a very violent country. There are many cases, whether you talk about gender-based violence and femicide, carjackings, murder, rapes, etc., etc. But that if there isn't a concerted effort to do something about it, and central to the problem is a man, who I always say this man was once a boy, was once innocent. So something has gone wrong in the psyche of the South African man. And what can we do? Because I believe that each and every one of us has a role to play. So really the foundation was born out of an acknowledgement of that, and also motivated by my own personal story of violence.
So tell us a little bit about the run, when it'll be taking place, and the kind of awareness that you want to raise.
So it is a social campaign, and we could have chosen anything. I mean, we could have chosen golf, but I personally love running. But there also is a lot of time between the run and finishing, where you've got a lot of time for reflection and talking to other people. It takes place on the 26th of November, which is just the day after the international campaign on gender-based violence. The 16 days of activism kicks off on the 25th of November. And it takes place at Featherbrooke Village Shopping Centre, which is in Willowbrook or Reimsach in the Ruhrport area. And it's a partnership between us and the shopping centre to say, there has to be daily activism around ending violence. And the theme is, let's orange the world.
Now, running and creating awareness in the form that you've chosen is, of course, a noble cause. But it's not enough in terms of raising awareness and making sure that, I suppose we can't eliminate the scourge in its entirety at the moment, but reducing it as much as we can. What else, in your experience, in your different stakeholder engagements, do you think needs to be done as an immediate form of action?
So this past week we had the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And as much as the sound bites that come out of that conference can give hope and encouragement, there is a lot of work that has to be done at ground level. And I believe that every single one of us has to do that. If I look at the recent crime stats, for example, over 9,000 rapes were reported, and the majority of those took place in the home. So either the home of the rapist or the home of the victim, the survivor. So that tells me that the problem is closer to home than we want to perhaps acknowledge. There has to be practical work that we have to do. And central to that for me is how we raise our boys. So we have to take a preventative approach that says these young boys, whether they are 8, 10, 11, etc., have not yet committed a crime. So when we talk about perpetrators of gender-based violence and femicide, they are not yet the problem. But one day they will become the problem, because stats tell us that one day they'll become part of the problem. So it's about how do we raise them differently to be the kind of men that I say will not abuse power, rank and privilege one day.
There is the issue that you've just raised of the boy child, but also the justice and legal system in our country is quite flawed, especially the policing system, in that our police don't know how to deal with a complainant of this nature, so you'll find many women don't complain. But also, you find that, and this was actually said recently, that it's not new rapists that come to the fore that contribute to the increasing rapings, but it's repeat offenders, in that people are put on parole and so on, and so they repeat. So in your view, what do you reckon needs to be done in terms of policies and legalities around rapists and perpetrators of gross GBV crimes in the country?
So often enough, Rapiwa, we've been said that as a country we have all these plans and legislation and they look great on paper, but the implementation is very shoddy. And the strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide is one particular document which does exactly that. On paper, looks great, implementation very woeful, to say the least. Part of what needs to be done, and I say this and it may sound like a like a cliche, but we all have a role to play. The policing and criminal and justice system, I think we have to, with hand on heart, say that even if they try, they will never be able to solve the problem on their own. We can get many police on the streets. We'll never be able to get to the root of the problem. So I believe that as communities, we need to stand together. And I say it not in a way that we've seen some of the operations bring people together, a sort of social mobilization, but one that does not add to the problem, because we've seen some of the operations, for instance, that have come together to say we want to tackle issues of criminality in our communities and so on, but how they've done it exactly exacerbates the problem, because they themselves have used violence in order to address violence. So,
and I suppose one of the things with that is that a lot of these families keep it within the family, where you're not going to report the uncle who violated a young child or whatever it may be. And so how do you change that mindset, that it's not about just protecting a family member or whatever, close friend or whatever it may be?
So yes, the repeated offenders, and some of them come from our homes. If you look at the phenomenon of gender-based violence and femicide, you talk to men and you will hear some men, for instance, say, well, I'm not part of the problem because I don't hit my partner, for example. I've never lifted a hand to a woman. But it is that which is part of the problem, because we tend to look away. When we see a woman walk past and I'm with a group of my friends, male friends, and they make comments which are problematic, and we don't call them out. We turn a blind eye when we know that a crime has been committed, and we sweep it under the carpet, particularly in families, to say, well, we'll deal with this within the family confines. But what about the trauma to that survivor? The trauma which in some instances never goes away, goes on to affect this young woman for the rest of their lives. So I think we need to, as communities, with hand on heart, if we really want to change things, we need to do things slightly differently. And slightly differently means we speak up, we call it out. But also, we realize that we also have a role to play, whether it is what we say or what we don't do. So by omission, we are part of the problem. And I think the days of perhaps pointing a finger and saying, well, government must do something, should come to an end. We should be looking at ourselves and say, what is it that I as an individual do or can do to be part of the solution?
And then finally, very briefly, you all have chosen the color orange.
Yes.
And there is a theme from the United Nations. Maybe tell us a little bit about that, and the kilometers that people can get tickets for, and where they can get those tickets.
Yes. So orange, UN Women, that's their theme. To color the world orange. It's a color that symbolizes non-violence, which actually is what our foundation is about. It's about promoting a non-violent society. The tickets are available on our website. That's sylvestermashilo.co.za. You've got 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. The 5 kilometers is 50 rands, and the 10 kilometers is 100 rand. The proceeds go towards our boys mentorship program and our positive manhood programs. So they are available 26 November, starting at 7 a.m.
Well, good luck to you, and I hope many people do turn out for this important event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That is Sylvester Mashilo joining us this morning to speak about issues around gender-based violence and what foundations like his own are doing to raise awareness and perhaps create some kind of a change within the system.